In the last video in this research essay series, we looked at locating a suitable topic. In this video, we are going to narrow your topic down to match the length of your essay. This task is very difficult. Students inevitably choose a topic that is too broad. A topic that is too broad will ensure that you can't prove your thesis in the length allotted by your teacher for your essay. This task requires the assistance of your teacher, but in my experience, many are too busy to offer much helpful guidance. So I'm going to take you through the process of narrowing down your topic to a sufficient degree. If you can learn this skill, you will be able to deliver presentations, oral or written, on almost any topic and be successful. But mastering this skill is not easy and does not come quickly for most of us. What is more, there are a few textbooks devoted to this exact topic. So most students are left floundering, lost as to what to do. And they only really understand that the topic is too broad once they have read quite a bit of literature. I'm going to discuss this topic in the context of thesis statements. But in most research essays, there is a research question which is behind the thesis statement. I'll discuss that research question in my next video. Let's consider two examples and see how you can go from a topic that interests you to a specific thesis statement. Now, there is some overlap with the previous video, but in that video, I rather focused on what you need to do to find a more specific or suitable topic. That is to say, develop a bibliography and begin reading. By contrast, in this video, we will ask leading questions that allow us to narrow the topic down sufficiently. So let's begin by taking one general topic, the Arctic region and natural resources. So how do we begin to narrow down the topic? Now, the process I'm going to go through is applicable to nearly every subject that you might choose. The first thing you need to do is to define the terms. In this case, how do we define the Arctic? And which resources are we talking about? Are we talking about hydrocarbons? Oil and natural gas? Are we talking about those that you mine, phosphates, bauxite, iron ore, copper, nickel, or diamond? Are we discussing fisheries or fresh water or hydropower? These are important concepts to define, and with that definition, it allows you then to go into more detail in one direction or another. But before we get to that, we need to ask ourselves, who are the players in the Arctic region? And we find out there are two main groups: the actual Arctic Council members, those which are geographically proximus to the Arctic region, and the near Arctic countries. And so now we have a plethora of countries from which to choose or to consider for our research. There are many other areas of inquiry we could make, such as technological developments in the region, that the Arctic has catalyzed military development in the area, or the interesting symbiotic relationship between global warming and the Arctic and its geopolitical interests. There are many others, but there are lots of interesting ideas within a general topic, and you need to understand that from the beginning. But from this list that we've made, in just a few minutes, we have many vectors or paths from which to develop our research. We can choose one resource and focus on this, or we can focus on two countries within the Arctic Council and their overlapping interests. We can look at the relationship between the Arctic Council and the near Arctic countries, or how the Arctic interests have affected the relations between two countries. There are so many aspects, interesting aspects to consider, that one of them will produce something novel and interesting. In general, if you make a comparison between two entities or two countries, or any aspects along that way where a comparison is made, this has the potential to yield interesting and new results, especially if that comparison has not yet been made. In fact, finding original comparisons is an easy way to find a theme that is original. Let's say that we want to write on the UN. So let's look at a second example. We're interested in the United Nations. So we begin by asking ourselves which areas of the UN interest you. Well, first of all, we need to ask ourselves what are the various programs within the UN, the United Nations. There are many functions and activities, of course. So you can go online and very quickly find out the various programs as I have done here on my phone. Let's say you finally settle on the topic of peacekeeping, since you might be opposed to war. So you want to look at peacekeeping missions of the UN. So if you go on to the UN peacekeeping missions site, as I have here, you will find a list of the various peacekeeping missions that are ongoing at the minute. Now, you can sort this list by region and time. Obviously, we've looked at ongoing missions. And if you see here, we have missions in the Middle East and in Africa. And so this produces perhaps a potentially interesting comparison. So let's think about choosing one peacekeeping mission from Africa and one from the Middle East. And we might want to consider two missions that have similar problems: civil war, border conflicts, or reports of genocide. So at this point, you'll need to take some time to do some reading about the individual peacekeeping missions and the conditions around which these were inaugurated or begun, and then try to find two that might be of a similar ilk or have similar sort of conditions. Once we identify interesting peacekeeping missions which have a similar sort of conditions around them, then we can begin perhaps to make some interesting observations. One more thing we need to do before we sign off on our topic is to find out if this topic or this subject has been researched before. So we simply do a Google search of these two UN peacekeeping missions and see if there are any articles or books on them. If there has been a comparative study of these two areas before, there's still a chance that you have a topic. So even though there might have been work done on the topic, all is not lost. Read the articles and see what they discuss and ask yourself what they've missed. Oftentimes, an article or two can be very helpful on your topic, as it will provide the holes or areas from which you can research or begin your research. In other words, there's almost always something interesting to say on a topic, because in academia, no one really has ever written the last word on an important topic. I'm going to have more to say about thesis statements and research questions and honing your topic in later videos in this series. If you've liked this video, then give me a comment below or make a suggestion or ask a question. Thank you very much and see you next Tuesday.